Welcome grade 9s. I hope that exercise 3 went well. We're going to look at a shorter way to calculate the amount of money I've earned if I'm being paid in simple interest. So when I talk about the simple interest formula, we're going to see this as a shortcut to be able to answer pretty much the same questions that we answered in exercise 3. However, later on, and especially in later grades, the shortcut becomes incredibly important for solving more difficult problems that we haven't really encountered yet. So I hope this video today is interesting in terms of a short way to do these, but just remember that you can always do the questions just like you were doing in exercise 3 in a slightly longer way. Let's remind ourselves on some of this terminology here, and you're going to see how in the formula we use letters to represent some of these ideas. So that initial amount that we either deposited or borrowed if it was a loan, we're going to call the principal amount. And so if we think of a principal amount, we're going to call it or represent it by the letter P. The duration or the time of the investment, how long we're leaving our money in for, or how long we're paying off our loan, we're going to use the letter N to represent that time. So N is normally in years. The interest rate that the bank pays us is going to be denoted by R for rate. But when we go and work with this, we need to go and convert our percentages into their decimals or their fraction form. So when we have the number written as a decimal or as a fraction, we use the letter I. So here's another little mini formula that says the I value is always the rate divided by 100. So for example, if I quoted you an interest rate of 6% per annum, well therefore R would be 6. But if I wanted to know what the I value is, well I need to take the R value of 6 and divide it by 100. Well that's what my percentage means. So in which case the value of I would be 0.06. The final value of the investment after the interest is accrued, or we've added it all up together, which is in the future, which is at the end of my investment period or the end of my loan. So we're going to call that A, which stands for the accrued amount or the accumulated amount. And that's all the money that's in the bank account. That's whatever money I invested plus the interest that the bank has paid me. Or in the case of a loan, it's the money I've borrowed plus the interest I have to pay on it. So now we get to these two very important formulas here. So our two formulas with A, P, I, and N, that's the accumulated amount. And then this formula, SI is equal to PIT. This is going to give us only the simple interest. So let's write down in our worksheet here, what does each of the variables in these formula represent? So A is the total amount of money in our account at the end, so time is very important, of the investment or the loan. We use the same formula. SI is only the amount of interest. So if it's an investment, how much the bank is paying me. If it's a loan, how much extra I need to pay back after paying back my loan. I stands for the interest rate, which normally means we need to take the percentage and divide it by 100. So we're going to convert it either as a fraction or as a decimal. Right. Remember, P stands for your principal amount, which in terms of time is at the beginning, at the start of the investment, or in a loan, it's how much I borrow. I borrow the smaller amount and I pay back much more. N is our time period. And certainly in grade 9, this is in years. N represents years. T is also our time period. And if you notice, it just makes this formula here, SI equals PIT, or we can say SIPIT, which is a little bit easier to remember. You can say SIPIN if you want to, but that formula there is a little bit nicer to say if we use T for time instead of N for time. But all your formulas that you're going to learn with compound interest and the formulas that you see in grade 11 and 12 all use N for time. So in grade 9 we're going to start to use N for time. Okay, let's quickly practice converting interest rates into their decimal form, i.e. from R to I, or a couple at the N from I to R. So if the rate was quoted as 12%, then the interest rate is going to be 12 out of 100, which we can write as a decimal as 0.12. If the rate was 14.45%, well that's 14.45 over 100, which is a decimal, is 0,1445. All right, check that on your calculator. You can use your S to D button on your calculator to check from the fraction to the decimal. Okay, if we had a rate of 7%, that's 7 over 100, which as a decimal would be 0,07. 6,2%, well, that's 6,2 over 100, which is 0,062. With these two in particular, be very careful about taking shortcuts that are going to get you into trouble. If you tell me 0,7, as you're going to see now, that is not the same as 7%. In fact, this is 70%, which is an unbelievably huge interest rate, and you're going to get crazy big numbers. In the same way, 0,062, if you told me that was 0,62, well, that's actually 62%, another ridiculously high interest rate. So please be careful if you're taking shortcuts and you write them as decimals to include that 0 there. All right, here we're given the I value, 0,24. So now we're going to work backwards. 0,24 is the decimal. If I wanted to write it as a rate, as a percentage, I need to multiply it by 100, which then will give me 24%. And now if we notice the 0,08, just like we had with 0,07, if we take 0,08 and we multiply it by 100 to write it as a percentage, that's 8% per year. Okay, so let's use these new formula that we've learned to redo the examples A and B that we did before we did exercise 3. We know what these answers are, so we're doing this now just to believe that this formula does work. Nicholas invests 5,000 Rand. So I want you to start to think, which letter does that represent? For 4 years at 8% per annum simple interest. Calculate the value of his final amount. So the first thing we need to notice here is that because they're asking us for the final total amount, it's going to be very efficient to use the formula with A, because that gives me my total final amount. Now, another nice idea is that while you are reading the story, if we've decided that we're going to use A, P, I, and N, well, in fact, in this case, we want to know what the accumulated amount is. P is the principal amount. That's the amount that he invested at the beginning. I hope you spotted that that was 5,000 Rand. I is the interest rate written as a decimal. So if we know it's 8%, that's 8 out of 100, which you can keep as 8 over 100, or you can write nicely as 0,08. And finally, N is the time period, and in the story we see that he's investing this for 4 years. You don't actually have to write your formula down, but certainly it helps you to learn it. And it helps us to see now what we're going to substitute. We're going to replace P with 5,000 Rand. Then we're going to open our brackets. 1 plus our I value is 0,08. You can write just 8 over 100. And then finally N, our time period, is 4. So if you go and type that all into your calculator and you go and push equals, you're going to see that your calculator tells you that this ends up to be 6,600 Rand, which is the answer that we got, but using a much longer method last time. So we know that his investment of 5,000 Rand has grown to 6,600. Okay, let's remember Vuyo and his loan shark. Right, he borrowed 3,500 Rand, so that's right at the beginning. And he was charged a very high rate of 14.2% per annum, simple interest. And the length of his loan period was 3 years. Now it's only asking us for the amount of interest. We can use the A formula. I'm going to show you how to do that after. But the most efficient way to do this is to use SI is equal to PIT. The simple interest is the principal multiplied by the interest rate multiplied by the time. Can you see where these values are? Well, we want to know how much interest, only the interest that he has to pay on this loan. P represents the amount he borrowed, 3,500 Rand. He's going to pay back more than that amount of money. I is the interest rate, which is 14,2 over 100. So as a decimal, that's 0,142. And finally, T, in this case, 3. So now we can go and substitute. The simple interest will be the principal amount, 3,500 Rand, multiplied by 0,142, multiplied by 3. And you're going to see that that's exactly the same as what we did beforehand. We're just doing it all in one step now. So this is 1,491 Rand. If you don't want to have to learn another formula, well, then we could have used our A formula, 1 plus I times N. In this case, we can work out what the A value is because we know the P value is 3,500 Rand. The interest rate, just like last time, is 0,142, and the N, the time period, is 3 years. So if we substitute 3,500 Rand, so as we substitute everything and we type that in our calculator, exactly like what we see that our calculator tells us this is 4,991 Rand. Now, this amount of money here, well, this here is not the interest. This, in fact, is the total repayment. If he borrowed 3,500, he's going to repay 4,991 Rand. So therefore, if we want the interest is going to be this payment of 4,991 Rand minus his original loan of 3,500 Rand. And if you go and type this in, we see that we get that same answer of 1,491 Rand. So you can just learn your A formula and use that for all of these types of questions. Okay, you need to go and do exercise 4 now, and remember to mark your work. In a follow-up bonus video, I am going to show you where this A formula comes from. You'll never be asked that in a test, that's why I'm doing it as a separate video, but some of you should be wondering, where does this formula come from? So in that second video, I'll show you where it comes from. Good luck.